Top 10 states where immigrants are not allowed in the United States, 2025. Predictions for 2025. In 2025, some parts of the US are turning their backs, not just on immigrants, but on the very idea of inclusion. Policies are tightening, enforcement is getting ruthless, and fear is becoming a daily reality. Why are families being tracked just for seeking a better life? Why are new laws quietly pushing people out without a word? And how did certain states become so hostile they've nearly closed their doors to newcomers? This isn't just politics, it's people's lives, and it's unfolding now. In today's video from The Journey of Wisdom, we reveal the top 10 states where immigrants are not allowed in the United States. Predictions for 2025. If you live in one of these states, you might want to watch until the end. Number 1. Arizona. In 2025, Arizona has made it unmistakably clear where it stands on immigration, and the reality on the ground has become increasingly harsh for undocumented individuals, and even for those who simply appear foreign. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's a lived experience that affects families, communities, and everyday life. Arizona's return to strict identification laws isn't just symbolic. It comes with real consequence. Businesses are facing massive fines, starting at $10,000 per undocumented worker, resulting in sudden closures and job losses. The fear of audits has caused widespread panic in small business communities, many of which were built and sustained by immigrants over generations. And while laws like these claim to protect jobs or security, they're often sweeping in their impact, hurting local economies and tearing apart trust between neighbors. What's more concerning is the shift in enforcement authority. Local officers now have the power to stop people based on what they call reasonable suspicion, a dangerously vague term that opens the door to racial profiling and wrongful detentions. Dozens of such cases have already been reported. People simply walking home, shopping, or heading to work being stopped and questioned. Arizona's immigration checkpoints are no longer just near the border. They're scattered across city streets, gas stations, and even hospital parking lots. And speaking of hospitals, a new policy requiring medical facilities to report undocumented patients receiving state-funded care is deterring people from seeking life-saving help. It's not just policies changing, it's people's lives being upended. Families are pulling their children from school, afraid that a visit from immigration officials might follow. Others are avoiding public spaces entirely, living in a state of constant stress and invisibility. This climate of fear is not just affecting immigrants. It creates tension across society. When fear drives people underground, trust disappears. Communities become fragmented, and the spirit of mutual care weakens. For those listening, whether you're directly affected or watching from afar, it's important to reflect. What kind of society are we building when fear replaces belonging? While states have their rights, we all have a deeper responsibility to uphold compassion, fairness, and human dignity. In a time when policies grow harsher, let's not forget the basic truth that every person deserves safety and respect. And in your own daily life, whether you run a business, teach in a classroom, or share a neighborhood with others, remember that kindness still has power. It's up to each of us to decide whether we contribute to fear or foster a community where everyone feels they belong. Number 2. New Jersey. Let's talk about New Jersey, a state once known for its bustling cities, cultural diversity, and deep immigrant roots. It was the kind of place where families could dream of a better future and actually have a shot at building it. But something has shifted. And if you've been paying attention, you've probably felt it too. In early 2025, a wave of budget cuts swept across the state, and one of the first casualties, programs that supported immigrants, legal aid clinics that once helped families understand their rights and stay together, gone or drastically downsized, state services that guided newcomers through housing, employment, or even just figuring out how to fill out government forms are now overworked, underfunded, or simply unavailable. So the question is, what happens to a community when the support system that held it up begins to disappear? Here's where it gets more complicated and more personal. A recent shift in policy means local law enforcement in New Jersey can now share personal data with ICE under what they call public safety exceptions. On paper, that might sound reasonable. But in practice, it's opened the door for people to get flagged over things as minor as traffic tickets or noise complaints. Can you imagine the fear of being reported just for a broken tail light? Neighborhoods that once felt like safe zones, where people could breathe a little easier, have quietly lost those protections. People aren't just worried, they're leaving. Entire families are packing up and moving, not because they want to, but because they feel they have to. And it doesn't stop there. In some school districts, families are now being asked for additional documents before their children can be enrolled. This might seem like a small policy shift, but the impact is huge. For parents who may not have every piece of paperwork, it creates confusion, fear, and worst of all, it keeps kids out of classrooms. From Newark to Trenton, the message isn't always shouted, but it's loud enough you're not as welcome as you once were. So, what does this mean for us, for the people watching this, for communities across America, and for the heart of what this country stands for? When policies change quietly, lives change loudly. And sometimes those most affected are the ones least heard. Are we paying enough attention? Are we listening to the stories behind the statistics, to the families whose lives are being turned upside down not by crime, not by chaos, but by quiet policy shifts? Here's the takeaway: when support systems disappear, and when trust is broken between communities and institutions, the cost isn't just political, it's deeply human. If you're someone who values justice, who believes in fairness and in helping others find their place in the world, then maybe it's time we ask not just what's happening, but what we can do about it. Because no matter where you stand, one truth remains: when we turn our backs on compassion, we all lose something far greater than we realize. Number 3. California. Let's talk about California. Yes, that California, often seen as the golden beacon for immigrant communities in the United States. If you've ever thought of it as the most welcoming, sanctuary-filled state in the nation, you wouldn't be wrong. But as we step into 2025, there's more beneath the surface than many realize. California, under the landmark California Values Act, SB 54, still officially holds sanctuary status. This law, passed back in 2017, continues to protect thousands of undocumented immigrants by limiting how state and local law enforcement collaborate with federal immigration authorities, especially in cases that don't involve criminal offenses. That's powerful. It's a legal and moral stance that has been admired across the country and even the world. But here's where the story takes a turn. Despite its statewide commitments, certain cities and counties are quietly moving in a different direction. Take San Clemente, for instance, a coastal town in Orange County. It's partnered with federal agencies to set up license plate readers and surveillance systems aimed at monitoring immigration activity near the border. These actions have sparked passionate debates. Are they protecting local communities, or are they undermining the very sanctuary values that define the state? This tension reveals a deeper truth. California is not a monolith. From the progressive halls of San Francisco to the more conservative voices of inland counties, there's a growing rift in how immigration is handled on the ground. Economic stress plays a big role here. With housing prices still soaring and essential services like healthcare and education stretched thin, some residents are beginning to question how resources are shared. You might hear folks asking, "Are we doing too much for people who aren't citizens?" Or, "How do we support everyone without losing what makes this state so compassionate?" And while these are tough, sometimes uncomfortable questions, they are ones communities must face with honesty and humanity. Even in immigrant-rich cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, quiet budget cuts are being made. Legal aid programs that once helped undocumented workers navigate the complex system are being trimmed, not in dramatic public announcements, but through subtle reallocations. It's the kind of shift that doesn't make headlines, but you feel it if you're living in that community, trying to renew a license, file for assistance, or simply survive. Then there's the impact on small immigrant-owned businesses. Remember that corner shop or family-run restaurant you used to visit? Many of them are gone. In fact, the number of new immigrant business licenses in California dropped by 13% since 2022. Business owners cite rising commercial rents, lack of city-level support, and overwhelming regulations. In Buddhist teachings, we're reminded, as a flower that does not wither, so is the wise who seeks the middle path. And maybe, just maybe, that's what California is being called to do now. Find a path that honors both its ideals and the new realities it faces. So let me ask you, what does it really mean for a state to be immigrant-friendly in 2025? Is it the laws on the books, or how those laws are lived day by day, community by community? Can compassion coexist with economic caution? These are not just policy questions, they're human ones. As someone who deeply believes in the interconnectedness of all beings, I feel California's struggle reflects something much larger, a national soul-searching about who we are and who belongs. And while there's no simple answer, the journey itself, as always, begins with awareness. What do you think California's next step should be? If you've watched up to this point, you're already someone who values staying informed about the future of immigration in the US. Comment below with Eyes Open 2025 to show you're aware and ready for what's ahead. Don't click away. There's still key info coming up that could shape how you understand the landscape of immigration in 2025. Stay tuned till the end. Number 4, Oklahoma. In 2025, Oklahoma has become a striking example of how immigration policies can transform seemingly quiet states into national talking points. With fewer residents than many large US cities, Oklahoma might not initially appear central to the immigration debate. But this year it has taken one of the most hardline approaches in the nation, and the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. The state, preemptively outlawing sanctuary cities before any had even formed, set the tone for a wave of legislation aimed at discouraging undocumented immigrants from settling there. What's particularly jarring is how far state lawmakers have gone. Local law enforcement officers are now mandated to report and detain undocumented individuals, even when there's no directive from federal immigration authorities to do so. That means a simple traffic stop or minor municipal violation, things that might have once resulted in a warning or small fine, can now become life-altering moments, as those involved may be flagged to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. These shifts have led to growing partnerships between certain counties and ICE, allowing for extended detentions of individuals while awaiting federal pickup. And the policy scope doesn't stop there. In early 2025, state legislators proposed a bill that could fine or penalize organizations and even individuals who provide support to undocumented people. This includes essential help such as housing, job referrals, or even basic charity work like food distribution. Picture a church pantry or a volunteer-run shelter now being scrutinized simply for serving their community. In fact, there was a case where a woman giving a co-worker a ride home, a co-worker without a valid license, found herself interrogated, and only one of them made it back to their family that night. Surprisingly, these measures haven't sparked the kind of widespread resistance seen in other states. In many of Oklahoma's small towns and rural communities, these policies are welcomed. Some locals see them as a way to restore order or prioritize local resources, especially in areas facing economic decline and population loss. However, there's a deep irony at play. Industries like agriculture and oil, which form the backbone of the state's economy, rely significantly on immigrant labor. Now, with heightened enforcement and fear spreading, farms report losing up to half their seasonal workforce, and several construction sites have stalled due to a shortage of laborers. This tension between economic need and political posture highlights a growing issue across the country. When fear becomes policy, the impact extends far beyond those directly targeted. Communities become divided, trust erodes, and essential services begin to suffer. For those navigating modern life, it's important to stay informed and compassionate, especially when laws start to reshape daily experiences in such profound ways. Whether you're in Oklahoma or elsewhere, now is a time for reflection. How do we balance the rule of law with humanity? And how do we ensure that in protecting our communities, we don't lose the very values that make them strong? Number 5. Georgia. Let's talk heart to heart. What would it feel like if simply applying for a job meant exposing your entire life? Not just your name or your resume, but every address you've lived at, every ID you've ever held, every stamp on your passport, just to be considered for work that barely pays minimum wage. In Georgia, that's no longer hypothetical. In 2025, Georgia has tightened its grip with some of the most aggressive immigration laws in the country. And for thousands of people just trying to live and work peacefully, the impact is devastating. The state mandates that every business with more than 10 employees must use E-Verify, a federal system that checks immigration status before hiring. There's no flexibility, no space for compassion, just strict enforcement. Now think about this. What happens to a student whose visa renewal is delayed, or a mother whose green card is under review due to a paperwork hiccup? They're getting blocked from jobs, even if they've lived here for years and contributed to their communities. How would that make you feel if it were your neighbor, your friend, or even you? And it doesn't end with jobs. The pressure on employers is relentless. Businesses that skip E-Verify risk steep fines or being shut down completely. Some could even face criminal charges. That fear is spreading, reaching beyond workplaces and into homes. Georgia is one of the few states still considering laws that could make it a crime to transport or house undocumented immigrants. That's right, offering a ride or even a place to sleep for the night could potentially get someone in legal trouble. What does that say about who we are becoming as a society? But here's where it gets even more unsettling. In early 2025, state lawmakers proposed a bill that would empower local police officers to randomly check immigration status during routine traffic stops. Similar to the controversial SB 170 law in Arizona, this means getting pulled over for a minor issue, like a busted taillight, could suddenly turn into an immigration investigation. If you've ever been nervous seeing flashing lights behind you, imagine that fear layered with the question of whether your entire future could be questioned on the side of the road. The ripple effect is massive. Entire families are moving out of Georgia, not because they've done something wrong, but because they no longer feel safe. The fear is palpable in communities outside Atlanta, where people whisper about neighbors who've quietly packed up and left. Farmers are watching crops rot in the fields because there aren't enough hands to pick them. Construction projects are falling behind schedule. Restaurants can't keep enough staff to stay open. So here's the question. When laws meant to enforce order start breaking apart families, businesses, and livelihoods, are they really making us safer, or are they just dividing us further? As we continue exploring the top 10 states with the harshest immigration crackdowns in 2025, think about what kind of future we're building, not just for immigrants, but for all of us. What values do we want to reflect as a society? Is it fear and exclusion, or fairness and opportunity? Let this be more than just news. Let it be a reminder that the choices we make in policy shape the soul of our communities. Stay tuned, and let's keep this conversation going. Number 6. Texas. Let's talk about Texas in 2025, because whether you live there or not, what's happening in the Lone Star State is sending shockwaves across the nation. Right now, Texas is standing at the center of a growing storm over immigration, and not just in theory or rhetoric. This is real policy, real people, and real consequences. Under Governor Greg Abbott's leadership, the state has pushed some of the boldest and most controversial immigration laws we've seen in years. One of the most talked about measures is Senate Bill 4, or SB 4, which essentially empowers local and state law enforcement to arrest anyone they suspect might be in the country illegally, without needing to check in with federal immigration authorities. Now pause with me for a moment. What does reasonable suspicion really mean? How do you prove or disprove that on the spot? For many civil rights groups and community advocates, this vague legal standard doesn't just raise red flags. It feels like an open invitation to racial profiling. Can you imagine being stopped simply because of how you look or the language you speak at the grocery store? The controversy hasn't gone unanswered. SB 4 is being challenged in multiple courts, with experts pointing out that it could be violating the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which says that immigration enforcement is a job for the federal government, not the states. And yet enforcement is still happening, but not everywhere. Some counties are following federal court orders to pause implementation, while others continue arresting people under the new law. The result? A patchwork of policies, confusion, and growing fear in immigrant communities, where simply driving to work or picking up your child from school could lead to an arrest, even for U.S. citizens, or legal residents who happen to fit a profile. But the story doesn't end there. Governor Abbott has doubled down with a military-style operation called Operation Lone Star. This initiative deploys National Guard troops, state troopers, and even private contractors to patrol the Texas-Mexico border. They've gone as far as building barriers, digging trenches, and clashing with federal officers over the placement of razor wire. In fact, there have been documented cases where state forces have physically cut through federally installed barriers, escalating tensions between state and federal agencies. It raises a profound question. What happens when one state starts acting like its own immigration agency? And if you think this only affects people without legal status, think again. The ripple effects are hitting every corner of life in Texas. Families are afraid to send their kids to school, people are avoiding hospitals even when they're sick, and businesses, especially in agriculture and construction, are losing workers they depend on. Many immigrants, even those here legally, are choosing to leave the state altogether, fearing they'll be the next to get caught up in a system they don't trust. So here's something to ask yourself. Is this really about border security? Or are we watching the lines between law enforcement and civil liberties being redrawn? Now, to be fair, there are Texans who stand behind these actions. They believe their communities are overwhelmed, and they see these policies as long overdue protection. But on the other side, critics are sounding the alarm that Texas is stepping into dangerous territory, becoming a kind of shadow immigration state, where the rules are different depending on where you are, and where the fear is very real. Whether you view these moves as necessary or alarming, one thing is certain: Texas isn't just reacting to immigration, it's redefining the rules. And the rest of the country is watching, wondering if this is a glimpse into the future of immigration policy in America. So what do you think? Is Texas leading or overstepping? Is this courage or control? The conversation is far from over, and your voice matters. Thanks for sticking with us. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to big changes like these. Type "Stay Informed 2025" below if you're ready to keep your mind open and your facts straight. The last few states on this list might just surprise you. Don't miss them. Number 7. Florida. Florida, long known for its warm beaches and thriving cultural diversity, is rapidly becoming a state where immigrants, whether documented or not, feel watched, unwelcome, and even at risk simply for existing. In 2025, policies under Governor Ron DeSantis have created an environment where fear and uncertainty are part of daily life for many immigrant communities. One of the most striking shifts is the new authority given to campus police, who traditionally focus on student safety and campus issues, to now enforce federal immigration laws. That means students who came to Florida seeking education and opportunity might find themselves under constant scrutiny, even in what should be safe learning spaces. It's a policy shift that blurs the line between education and law enforcement, turning college campuses into zones of tension rather than growth. This move is only one piece of a broader strategy that includes strict E-Verify requirements, which force employers to check the immigration status of every new hire. On the surface, this might sound like a tool for legal compliance, but in practice, it becomes a weapon that intimidates small business owners and discourages hiring altogether. Many local businesses, especially those in agriculture, construction, and hospitality, sectors heavily dependent on immigrant labor, are feeling the pressure. Some are facing fines, investigations, or the threat of closure simply for trying to stay afloat by hiring the only workforce available. But perhaps the most unsettling part is how personal these laws have become. Even offering a ride to a friend or relative without legal status could now bring legal consequences. This shifts the atmosphere from community and compassion to caution and suspicion, where people are afraid to help one another. What's unfolding is not just policy, it's a social unraveling. Long-established families are quietly leaving, not because they've broken laws, but because the environment has turned hostile. Communities that once buzzed with cultural festivals, small businesses and shared dreams are growing silent. Fields are left unharvested as farmers plead for labor that's no longer there. In chasing a certain political agenda, Florida may be losing its identity as a place of opportunity and promise. So as we look at these changes, it's worth asking, are we creating a society where fear overrides fairness, where survival replaces support? In today's interconnected world, where many of us have immigrant roots or neighbors, we must consider what kind of community we are building, not just for others, but for ourselves. Standing up for dignity, compassion, and wise policy is not about politics. It's about preserving the human values that hold society together. Number 8. Missouri. In 2025, Missouri is making headlines for pushing the boundaries of immigration enforcement, with a controversial new proposal that reflects a growing nationwide trend, turning everyday citizens into enforcers. The state legislature has introduced a bill that would create a financial incentive program encouraging residents to report undocumented immigrants. Under this proposal, known informally as the Missouri Immigration Accountability Act, individuals could receive up to $1,500 for tips that directly result in the apprehension or detention of an undocumented person. Though the bill has yet to become law, it has sparked intense debate within Missouri and across the country. Supporters argue that it empowers local communities to participate in upholding immigration laws, claiming it will reduce crime and protect resources. But critics warn that it could lead to a dangerous culture of suspicion, profiling, and false accusations, putting both undocumented individuals and legal immigrants at risk of harassment. This proposal isn't occurring in isolation. Missouri lawmakers have also floated measures to increase surveillance and documentation requirements in public spaces, including schools, hospitals, and DMV offices. Some school districts have quietly begun requesting more detailed residency and citizenship paperwork from families enrolling children, a move that immigration advocates say disproportionately targets Latino and immigrant communities. What's even more concerning is that the language of the bill is vague, leaving room for interpretation about what constitutes a valid report. Civil rights organizations argue this could lead to a flood of unfounded or racially motivated tips, overwhelming local authorities and violating constitutional protections. Legal experts have also raised alarms, saying the bill, if passed, would likely face immediate court challenges on due process and equal protection grounds. Even without official legislation, the fear is already taking hold. Community groups have reported a sharp drop in immigrant participation in public services and local events. Small business owners in immigrant-heavy areas say they are seeing fewer customers, and some employees are quitting or disappearing overnight out of fear that co-workers or neighbors might report them. The social cost is mounting. Families are going underground. Trust in local institutions is eroding. And while the measure is pitched as a tool for public safety, it's also fostering division and fear within Missouri's diverse communities. As of now, Missouri may only be testing the waters, but if this law passes, it could serve as a blueprint for other states looking to deputize their citizens in the immigration debate. In the heart of the Midwest, Missouri is becoming a battleground not just over policy, but over what kind of community the state wants to be. Number 9. Alabama. Let me take you into the heart of a place where something as ordinary as a trip to the grocery store or a school drop-off could carry the weight of uncertainty and fear. Alabama, in the year 2025. Let's be honest, how would you feel if you had to constantly look over your shoulder, not because you broke a law, but simply because of your immigration status, or even because of the people you care about. In Alabama, this isn't just a fear, it's a daily reality for many. The story of Alabama's immigration stance begins with a law passed back in 2011, House Bill 56, which was once considered the harshest immigration legislation in the country. And now, more than a decade later, its echoes are still shaping lives. What does it say about a state when traffic stops aren't just about traffic violations anymore, but potential gateways into a labyrinth of legal peril? If you're pulled over for something as minor as a cracked taillight, your immigration status could suddenly become the focal point of an investigation, even if you've done nothing wrong. It doesn't stop there. That sense of surveillance extends to places that should feel safe and welcoming. Schools. Under House Bill 56, school officials were once required to gather immigration information about students and even their parents, creating a chilling effect that lingers to this day, where many families hesitate to enroll their children or seek help when they need it most. Now, you might be wondering, hasn't the law changed over time? And yes, to be fair, parts of House Bill 56 were blocked or rolled back after intense legal battles and public outrage. But what's striking is the persistence, the ongoing push from lawmakers to revive and reinforce these provisions, to keep that same rigid structure in place. What does it mean when a law that caused so much harm still has defenders, still inspires policy decisions today? That's a powerful reflection of a mindset that refuses to shift. According to recent census data, around 160,000 immigrants currently live in Alabama, and many of them are here legally. Yet even those with green cards or work permits say they live in fear. Fear of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, fear of being mistaken for someone they're not, fear of being separated from their families. What would that feel like, to build a life somewhere and still feel like you're unwelcome? And it's not just about personal stories. It's also affecting the entire community in very real, tangible ways. Farmers are struggling to find laborers willing to work in their fields. Construction sites are falling behind schedule, and local businesses, especially restaurants, can't hire enough staff to keep their doors open. Have you ever noticed how deeply immigration is tied to the backbone of a state's economy? When people live in fear, they withdraw, they leave, or they stop contributing at the level they want to. And here's something else to sit with. It's not only undocumented immigrants who are at risk. Under Alabama's laws, if you give someone who's undocumented a place to stay, or even give them a ride, you could face criminal charges. Can you imagine the moral tension that creates for neighbors, friends, even relatives? What kind of society do we become when helping another human being could lead to your own arrest? This kind of legislation doesn't just enforce borders. It builds invisible walls between people, communities, and opportunities. It sends a message: you are not welcome here, even to those who've worked hard, followed the rules, and contributed deeply to the life of the state. Number 10. Tennessee. In 2025, Tennessee has emerged as one of the most unsettling examples of how immigration enforcement is changing the face of everyday life in America, particularly for immigrants, regardless of their legal status. What began with a series of legislative proposals has turned into a sweeping cultural shift, one that reaches into spaces previously thought to be safe and neutral, like public schools. In a move that's raised eyebrows and sparked fear among immigrant families, Tennessee now requires public schools to report the number of undocumented students enrolled. This single change has transformed schools from centers of learning into instruments of surveillance. Educators, once trusted guides for our children, are now caught in a painful dilemma. asked to act more like immigration screeners than mentors. The result is a breakdown of trust, not just between schools and families, but within entire communities. And this change isn't isolated. Tennessee's aggressive stance on immigration has taken deep root in other public systems too, most notably law enforcement. Through the 287G program, several counties in Tennessee have formed direct partnerships with ICE, turning routine local arrests into potential deportation proceedings. Even minor infractions like unpaid parking tickets or driving without a tail light can quickly escalate into life-altering events for immigrants and their families. This kind of hyper-enforcement doesn't just impact those without documentation, it sends a message to every immigrant in the state: you are not welcome here. And that message is only growing louder. Tennessee lawmakers are now pushing legislation that would empower state agents to carry out immigration duties independently of federal oversight. If passed, this would essentially create a state-run immigration force, opening the door to even more arbitrary detentions, racial profiling, and community fear. It's a chilling development that underscores how rapidly state politics can affect real lives. What makes this especially difficult is how fear spreads beyond those directly targeted. Legal immigrants and even US citizens of immigrant heritage are feeling the pressure. Business owners are losing customers, especially those in immigrant neighborhoods. Families are scared to seek medical care or renew a driver's license. Some are pulling their children out of school entirely, worried that attendance might invite scrutiny or worse. The psychological toll is immense. Tennessee, a state celebrated for its music, its culture, and its warm Southern identity, now finds itself in stark contrast to those values. So what does this mean for the rest of us? It reminds us that the erosion of empathy can begin subtly, in policies that seem distant, and grow into daily realities that change how we live, work, and relate to each other. For those listening who may not be directly affected, this is a call to stay informed and compassionate. Whether we agree with these policies or not, we must ask ourselves, are we creating a society where fear becomes more powerful than understanding? Every time laws are passed in the name of security, we must weigh their impact on humanity. Real safety is not built on exclusion and suspicion, but on trust, dialogue, and shared dignity. As we witness Tennessee's approach, let it be a moment not only of concern, but of reflection. And for some, a spark to speak up for a different kind of future. And there you have it, our look into the top 10 states where immigrants are not allowed in the United States, predictions for 2025. These shifts in policy aren't just headlines, they shape the daily lives of families, workers, students, and entire communities. Whether we agree or disagree, we're all affected by the kind of society we choose to create. As we reflect on these changes, may we remember that behind every law is a person, behind every policy a story, and that compassion, not fear, is what truly holds a nation together. If this video helped you see things more clearly or sparked a question in your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the Journey of Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos exploring the deeper stories behind today's world. Together, let's keep learning, reflecting, and walking the path of awareness.